We're live.
Should I be at the front? Should we come sit on the things behind?
Not until
Okay.
like you'll each meet and then.
Okay, and then we sit behind once we're done.
Yeah.
Okay, amazing.
Yeah.
Okay.
But if you want to, it's all there.
So visible.
I think we're going to start in that second. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Bureau of General Services Queer Division and to The Past is a Very Trans Place. Reading and conversation with Fitzpatrick and Aurora Mattia. My name is Ella. I'm the events manager for the Bureau and also for Hiveline Books in Bushwick. Well, I'll get into it, but for those of you who don't know, the original owners of the Bureau are moving to Portland, where it is warmer and gayer, and they have left the Bureau in our hands to take care of for the foreseeable future. Before we get into all of that, we want to acknowledge that the Bureau, as part of the 5 boroughs, resides on the ancestral and unceded lands of the Lenape-Hoking people, and also acknowledge that the fight for Palestinian liberation and sovereignty is a part of the global interconnected struggle for queer liberation across the world. Until we are all free, we are none of us free. Other than that, as I mentioned, I never know how to get out of a land acknowledgement. You know, I know how to get in, and then I sort of am stuck here in the acknowledgement, and it could go on forever. Other than that, as I mentioned, Hiveline Books in Bushwick has recently acquired the Bureau. We are the last queer bookstore in Manhattan, and as a part to keep the Bureau alive, we launched a fundraiser last month to figure out how to run this bookstore. And we hit our initial goal in like under 2 weeks, which is amazing. Thank you all so much. But we have launched a stretch goal to hopefully keep the Bureau alive even better. And, you know, right now the Bureau is run through volunteer efforts, but we're shifting over to a paid model hopefully in the next few months so that we can pay people for their time and their labor. And all of that money will go to that. So we have a QR code here on this sort of clunky plastic stand thing that I'm going to pass around if anyone would like to donate. And also, I'm going to introduce in just 1 second our organizers of this event. And if you would like to donate to them, they're going to hopefully give some money directly to our readers tonight.
All of the money. Yeah.
All of the money, right. Not some of the money you give, but some money that you give will go to the readers. Nobody's pocketing anything. Let me make sure I didn't forget anything. Nope. So I'm going to stop talking now because this event is not about me. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce 2 of the organizers of tonight's events, Jacob Rahm and Sandra Goldstein-Leonard.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sandra. My capacity here is I am a PhD student in early modern trans studies at the CUNY Graduate Center. And I'm just going to quickly say thank you to the Bureau of General Services Queer Division, to Hiveline Books, and specifically to Jules and Ella for their immense generosity in having this event happen. Jacob really truly believed we could make it happen, and I really was not a believer. So I'm really just so floored and excited that you all are here. And an absolutely massive thank you to Kat and Aurora for being willing to make our dream come true and have this event.
It's my dream too! I'm so excited!
I'm going to read the bios for Kat and Aurora, and then Jacob is going to give us more of a sort of formal introduction and some context as to why we organized this event. Then we're going to have the readings. There'll be a reading from Aurora and then a reading from Kat. And then we'll have a discussion section. Jacob and I have prepared some questions, and then we'll have an open Q&A. So that's how we're going to do the event. Sound good?
Yeah.
Okay. So Kat Fitzpatrick is the author of the novels The Callout, which was awarded the 2023 Lambda Award for Transgender Fiction, and The Dinner Party, which publishes in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, in
26,
days.
26, they moved it back from the 19th.
May 26th, so extremely soon, and I know that the launch party will be at Hive Mind Books in Bushwick, so look out for that. 21st, yes. She is the author of the poetry collection Glamour Puss and co-editor of the anthology Meanwhile Elsewhere, Science Fiction and Fantasy from Transgender Writers. Fitzpatrick is the first trans woman director of a women's...
No, not anymore, that's an old biography.
Great, that's okay. Kat Fitzpatrick is a teacher at Rutgers University and also the editrix at Little Puss Press. Aurora Mattia is the author of the novels Unsex Me Here and The Fifth Wound. Her stories have appeared in Zoetrope, All Story, Prairie Schooner, Spasm, Joyland, and Elsewhere. She believes in a free Palestine and an end to ice, from the Rio Grande to the Jordan River, from the Gulf of Mexico to the Mediterranean Sea. Okay, now I will turn it over to Jacob.
Hi, everyone. Oh, please, no. My name is Jacob. I'm also a PhD student in early modern studies. And I just wanted to say a little bit about the kind of context for this event, which is sort of paired with the Early Modern Trans Studies Conference, which took place at Queens College Thursday, Friday, and today. So Sandra and I are kind of switching from conference mode to fun, like literary reading mode with maybe a few glitches. But yeah, I wanted to say a little bit about kind of the field of early modern trans studies and why we wanted to kind of bring these particular authors into conversation with the work that we do. And this will be so brief, so yeah, don't worry if it's really boring. Early modern trans studies emerged as a field in 2019 with the publication of a special issue of a journal called the Journal of Early Modern Cultural Studies. But its story really begins in 2017 when three scholars named Simone Chess, Colby Gordon, and Sawyer Kemp happened to meet each other in a seminar at a Shakespeare conference. The friendship between these three and their many comrades and collaborators has become the foundation of an academic field whose exponential growth and near unparalleled vitality are a direct result of the way Colby, Sawyer, and Simone, and many other collaborators have prioritized friendship, mentorship, and community care over academic hierarchies and institutional prestige. And the culture of the conference really reflects that. So what is early modern trans studies? Although the early modern period, roughly 1450 to 1750, depending on who you ask, has long been a rich subject area for studies of gender, race, and sexuality, early modern trans studies has emerged in the last several years with like a slight difference from earlier feminist gender studies and queer theory approaches, sometimes more than slight. As such, it emphasizes the transhistorical politicization of certain kinds of bodies and the biopolitical machinery of state and church-endorsed sex and gender categories. It has significant intersections with critical race studies, disability studies, and the histories of empire, among other subfields. Early modern trans studies is also deeply invested in the nourishment and protection of trans life here and now. As we like to say, you don't have to be trans to do early modern trans studies, but you do have to know and love trans people. And as trans people, we have often been told that we have no history, or that what history we have begins with Laverne Cox or Marsha P. Johnson or Christine Jorgensen or Lily Elbe. We have been told, in short, that the past is cis. We are here to tell you otherwise. From the trans feminine sex worker Eleanor Reichener to the intersex street vendor Aniceed Water Robbins and beyond, the medieval and early modern archive, as well as the archives of many other times and places, and this is what we happen to study, offers us many trans ancestors. It also offers us forms of trans possibility beyond individual biographies. Genderless angels, alchemical transformations, pregnant male dragons, self-generating phoenixes, self-castrating clerics, miraculous lactation, male menstruation, and the deeply vaginal wounds of Christ, to name just a few examples. In different and overlapping ways, the work of Kat Fitzpatrick and Aurora Mattia brings us to the trans place of the past, to borrow a phrase from the scholar Beans Veloci, or brings the trans past into contact with our trans present in all its desperate urgency. For example, in Aurora Mattia's beautiful and dreamlike first book, The Fifth Wound, Eleanor Reichener appears in drag as St. Catherine of Siena to offer the main character the Bun Book of Hours, a tiny illuminated medieval manuscript containing a famous and astonishingly yonic illustration of Christ's side wound. Meanwhile, Kat's work consistently plays with the forms and genres of early modern and Victorian verse, taking up and transing modes such as pastiche and pastoral, and verse constraints such as the sonnet, ballad, mock epic, and more. Sandra and I have been reading, loving, and talking to each other about their work for many years, So when the Early Modern Trans Studies Conference came to New York City, it felt like a perfect opportunity to kind of bring them to our field and bring our field to them. So they're each going to share a bit of their work with us, and then Sandra and I will kind of ask them to talk a little bit about their kind of the way that they bring trans history to life and kind of give it to us for use in many ways. So without further ado, please welcome Aurora and Mattia.
Hi. So I'm gonna read just the part about Eleanor Reichner because it seems appropriate. Just wanted to mention my new book is due in 2 weeks from today, and it's set in Texas in the 70s and Texas now. It's about kind of about a trans woman country singer, and a lot of my work tends to deal with real or invented historical figures. So this is no different. The part I'm going to read from is like right after I got knifed in the face, and I'm in a hospital bed, and I get a visitor. Okay, where's it? Okay. Oh, and at this point I was like, I don't really know what happened to my eye. Will I be able to see again, etc. Okay. No one ever taught me how an eye dies, if it is all at once, like a guillotine of twilight, or slow, expanding, like the lamp of a locomotive knifing softly through the night. Horses lifting their heads in the fields as you thrash and holler with your foot stuck in the tracks. Or if you live in the light forever, watching the crystals click and groan. Nonetheless, I thought, this is the beginning of blindness. Nonetheless, I was silent. Nonetheless, I listened to the flutter of moths, of pages of Sappho, of a surgeon's coat sail. As he wheeled me to the operating room, the surgeon begged me to file a police report. Why would I tell my story to the police? Why throw pearls before swine? Let me say now that I dedicate the fifth wound to my blood. I dedicate it to the poet who wrote with a knife for a quill and my face for parchment. I dedicate it to Ezekiel's antlers. I dedicate it to the speck of shadow growing in my bright abyss. I dedicate it to the memory of Noel's face on the sidewalk as they wiped the blood from my breasts. I dedicate it to the name my mother gave me. I dedicate it to the names I give myself. I dedicate it to the song she wrote in 1986 and performed while cooking chicken fried steak in the kitchen in 2001, while I was out in the pecan woods watching horses foaming, forming from whirlwinds of purple dust. And so I dedicate it to my mother singing, "My daddy is buried in Texas with a bluebonnet field for his head." I dedicate it to the memory of the peacocks of a small desert town. I dedicate it to this moment that is not already gone, okay? I dedicate it to the shadow growing not larger, but nearer, dimensionalizing, particularizing into a mouth, a gesturing hand, a woman speaking, saying, "Dearest sister, I, Catherine, come to you now in the name of the pustules swelling milkily sour in your eye, and in the name of the spittle on your chin, and in the name of your precious blood, to offer this book of ours, formerly in the possession of the daughter of John the Blind, the sickly Bonne de Luxembourg, who died before her wedding day, until I dislodged it mere moments ago from her sepulchral clutch, and lest I forget, inside which, marking the apposite page, is a yellow poppy petal from your long-lost paramour, the siren of Anthemusa, and an epistle from that tomb-tongue rounder, Ezekiel, all of which will be yours if you allow me to sip from the font of your wound. At which moment, she opened the tiny 5-inch tall psalter to its extraordinarily delicate 331st page, on which was painted by Jean Lenoir and his daughter, how do you say her name? and his daughter Burgot in Paris in the year 1349, a rectangle as richly blue as Mary's robes, wherein thin golden vines from whose profusion emerges like a cavern dug into the abyss of the blank page, a red oblong slit, faded in the middle from the daily pious strokes of frail medieval fingertips, and representing, so said Catherine, the piercing of Christ's side by the holy lance of Longinus. Though on that page there was no Christ in sight, there was no Christ at all, only the fifth wound, eddy, swirl, and spiral. And here's a brief visual aid. Recently visible at the cloisters, but not anymore. But I asked, sorry, I was going to see if I was going to skip anyway. I'll just say. But I asked, bending toward the heart of a pinkish honeysuckle blooming forever in a blue field, beginning to imagine Pontius Pilate as a nurse, and Longinus as a surgeon, and Calvary as a windswept operating room. But I asked, seeing the Holy Lance as a scalpel, and the cross as a hand-carved operating table, and the crucifixion darkness as a crude celestial anesthesia, why are you addressing me in English when Catherine was from Spain? To which she, pressing a finger not only onto the surface of the page, but into the scarlet pool at its center, before lifting it back out, droplets of blood-red ink rolling into her palms and along her wrists, replied, "Ye of little faith." Before I, horny, resplendent, and recognizing now that dauntless daydreamer, Jesus of Nazareth, not as some son of God, but in fact, for what else was the crucifixion, another one of my TS_4 mothers, the symbol of whose sex reassignment surgery adorns every church, nunnery, and rosary. And noticed the imprint upon her robes between her hips of a cock exclaiming, "You're one of the girls," at which she smiled, lifting the ancient psalter to her lips, pressing her tongue into the cave, laughing, lapping, plunging, until I gasped, and some small dense point, some hot atom hovering, vibrating within my hips, loosened brim and broke open, flooding my bed sheets with waves of thick, translucent liquor, not once, but twice, 3 times, each time thicker and sweeter than the last, until Catherine, withdrawing her tongue from the small tome, her lips glazed with fluid, began to speak, pausing every so often to puff on a small silver flute that she let slip from the sleeve of her robe. How much time do you have? Okay. So this part I wrote in my best Middle English, and I've never tried to read it before, so I'm just gonna give it a go. I'm gonna kind of go like halfway there. I confess me own name is not Catherine, with whom on a sojourn in Siena I once shared a bed, in which the lady did tell by flame of fire the story of how she discovered the exquisite flavor of pus, having drank it in draughts from the fetid breast of a dying nun. I confess me own name is not Catherine, but Eleanor Reichner. Sorry, I'm sweating. And I hast come to thee, Ladybird, and to thy dismal 21st century, flowing from the deputies of yon cocksucker John Fresh, mayor of London, quo arrested me for what he called illud vitium detestibile nefandum et igniosum, but what that lovely lavender Anna knowned the ars of womanly love. Dressed as I was in the trifles of Elizabeth Broderer, quo riven in ornature which ravished even the most pomp-holy evangelic monk, and many a nun withal. Quo recompensed me royally, as befits me glassy-eyed divine lusts, me soul as still as a cistern of crystal, me moans as wild as clouds of devilish dust. Fie upon thee, John Fresh, in gone to me costly chamber of Venus, glorifying mine pertinence ut cum muliere, then reprobating it for me in turn. Reprobating me for it in turn. Half the lordship and cocks of London cunning to impregnate me, but I rotted their forthgettings in me wombless womb. Fie upon 'em, riff and raft, fie upon 'em, fie. But to thee, undeadly Anna, flower of poets, princess of fleshly kenning, God-kind kin of mine, pour sugar in thy rhymes with me, honey sweet seaman. To thee I forsaying, hallowed be thy name. It were Anna me told how that mystic of Siena were sermoning about a Christly quint, brim of blood, whirlpit of swirling time, veiled in a book of hours within whose scarlet water doth swim the whole memory of heaven. Well, what can I say? I invited her into my bed. We gossiped, drank whiskey, and nibbled a psychedelic herb Eleanor had plucked, she said, from the meadow above the cavern where Mary the Nazarene lies sleeping, awaiting the return of her apocalyptic paramour, that so-called God who left her in a stable to raise a celestial rake of a son. I asked her after a while why she'd come to me. Of all the women and all the wounds, why, leapfrogging the Middle Ages, arrive here at my hospital bed? Quote, the Archbishop bidden a synod, determinating whether to pelf the pearls of yours truly, keeping Frankish custom, popal arts, one and all brandishing scraps of biblical logic about the blessed fully fecund rib of Adam, debating whether to gloss her salsitude, that's me, as man or wine. So, hefting a Talmudic book of etymologies upon the flintstone altar, whirling through lifes of paper, avowing rib was a heretical translation of the semi-opaque Hebrew word for cockbone, and therefore Eve herself possessing a rare anatomy, and so on. I feeding them their own faith. With a flick of his wrist, the Archbishop ordering a soldier to forecast me in the crypt, and with a tilt of his head, commanding a lowly clerk to burn the book in the church furnace. It were hideous to behold, adorning with gold foil angles and pocock skulls. Little hell. And me cell I smell in the brenning. Empty hours except in smoke and terror, but I keep my mind about me. Barren in the dungeon dark, I've been seeking a way out. When that soldier wandering off to sip his silver pipe, I slipped the Lady of Luxembourg Psalter from my pocket, studying those timeless fey ciphers by moonlight. Was always skilly with a riddle, but the pinching fingers of the clock forbade me insight. Each time the soldier smoking for not more than a handful of minutes, so like the diving bird, I plunging into me treasure house of instance, questing for a luminous key. But my hand's been empty, until on the third day, reckless, wan hopely, I clofen mine lips to the winded book, and to me wonder, doing me own mouth with blood. There been no time for savoring. Hearing footsteps upon the tile stone, I gulp in the rosy-hued holy liquor, and then, perhaps it was, glimpsing the psalter's gilded spine, the soldier screaming, though his voice seeming as faint as a gnat, because a blessed a wind been whirling over me, whirling over like bird songs on a drunken dawn, stumbling myself home some morning from a forest revelry, Anna dressed in nothing except the green fronds of ferns, breaking on a laughter, spilling her peach-sweet potion, the world kaleidoscoping with leaves and feathers, with lantern light, topaz eyes, and woad maidenly love songs. I mean, okay, I said. I have 1,001 questions. I have omitted my questions here. However, should you like to peruse the transcript of the aforesaid questions, I invite you to send an email to silicone_angel69@hotmail.com. Quote, to explain how and why I came to your bed would require Leyland and Proserpine's molded pomegranate tongue, whose mistunes, rhymes, and reeks of rot been leveling by any attempt at Englishin. Like telling a sweven, that's a dream, in the form of a fable. I mean to say, by telling it to you, I would destroy the story. So I said, teach me how to sing.
Thank you, Aurora. And while Kat's coming up, I'm going to say something I forgot to say before, which is that if you want to support and encourage the work of these wonderful writers, you can Venmo me at Jacob Rom, JACOB-ROMM, and then we'll send, obviously, whatever you send. We had a sort of suggested donation of $10 to this event. No money is fine, $1 is fine. You should also buy their books after. And I'll maybe say this information again later in case. And Kat.
Hello, everybody. Hi. Hello, early modernists. I am so fucking excited to be here. When Sandra approached me and was kind of like, would you like to do a reading in association with the Early Modern Trans Conference? I was like, yes! I feel like suddenly kind of so seen. It is very exciting for me. So yeah, I have a new book coming out, which is they've not given me an actual copy of it yet, so I printed it off as a zine with like tiny print. It's too thick to actually get a stapler, so it might fall apart. But yeah, a large part of the way I write is kind of by pastiche, or you might, if you're being generous, say imitatio. And so there's one in here that's about Plato and one in here that is about a 20th century poet, but the other three sections are about early modern writers or are taking their cues from early modern writers. And so what I thought I would do is very briskly, I thought I would give you a choice. Do you want Richard Barnfield, Andrew Marvell, or John Wilmot, Earl of Rochester?
Barnfield.
Rochester.
Oh, okay, Rochester. I could honestly, I've never actually read the Barnfield. I have so the Barnfield one is sonnets. We got a Barnfield and Rochester. Let's do Rochester. So the Rochester I was thinking about here, Rochester is one of my absolute favorites. I don't know. I mean, he's such an arsehole. He did so many bad things, and yet his charm just overcomes them, and his true ability to be shamed and self-hating. I think he can teach us so much about shame. He is the person who feels maybe the most shame of anyone. I mean, he should, because of the things he did, which were bad. Anyway, I'm going to read the beginning. I'm going to read a little bit of Rochester, and then I'm going to read my stuff. So I'm just going to read kind of a bit of the beginning of a letter of Artemisia in the town to Chloe in the country, which is one of my favorite things. And my understanding of this poem is that they tell these stories that it's kind of a hall of mirrors, and the center of it is him. He's the worst person in it who has done all these terrible things, and everyone hates him. But this is the beginning. A lady is speaking. She's writing a letter to her friend, and she's cool. She's the nicest person in the poem. She's writing to her friend Chloe. Chloe, in verse, by your command I write. Shortly you'll bid me ride astride and fight. These talents better with our sex agree than lofty flights of dangerous poetry. When I reflect on this, I straight grow wise, and my own self thus gravely I advise. Dear Artemisia, poetry's a snare. Bedlam has many mentions, have a care. Your muse diverts you, makes the reader sad. You fancy you're inspired, he thinks you're mad. Consider too, 'twill be discreetly done to make yourself the fiddle of the town, to find ill-humoured pleasure at their need, cursed if you fail, and scorned though you succeed. Thus, like an arrant woman as I am, no sooner well convinced writing's a shame, that whore is scarce a more reproachful name than poetess. As men that marry, or as maids that woo, because 'tis the worst thing they can do, pleased with the contradiction and the sin, methinks I stand on thorns till I begin. I think what you guys are such a... I'm not going to sing very good after this. I'm going to be not as good as him. But I wrote this in the form of... I wrote a letter to Crabstick. Crabstick is a real person. My friend Benjamin Crabstick, who in fact is an early modernist. He wrote a PhD on booksellers in 17th century London, and then went off to do weird high-level tech librarian stuff instead, because he was I hate doing conferences. Anyway, I was very in love with him in a peculiar way for a long time, and this is a poem that I wrote in the form of a letter. Catherine in the city to Crabstick in the country. He was living in Macclesfield at that point. I was in Castlefield in Manchester. Well, Ben, and stop me if I go too long, because I haven't exactly got this one timed out. Well, Ben, you'd never ask for me to write. You're much too proud. You'll swear that you're all right. You don't need anything from anyone. But you're in Cheshire, which... we got someone laughing at the Cheshire joke. You're in Cheshire, which cannot be fun. And you're my oldest, dearest, closest friend. I miss you. So I have resolved to send you stories from the town to entertain you when you're bored of hills and cows and rain. Mm-hmm. This is the north. It's raining all the time. And as a bonus, put them all in rhyme. I know this choice is proof of how uncool I am and would attract the ridicule of all right-thinking readers, even if my lines weren't crude, laborious, and stiff. I tell myself to not be such a freak, but I can't help it. When there's a technique that's hard, unpopular, and out of date, then like an arrant woman, I can't wait. If I were scared of facing public shame, I'd be a dude and bear my father's name, precisely since it is a bad idea to start to use it straight away. So here. Right now, I'm out of work. This is set in 2012. Right now, I have a job now. Woo! Right now, I'm out of work. I cannot get my writing published, and of course, it's wet outside like 20 days a month. I'm sad. But Ben, I won't concede the world is bad, or not essentially. I still love all the secret bits of life, that Roman wall by the canal, that curry van, that car park where the kids all drink, that bar that's hidden in some sold-off public loos. I won't let go of joy. We must refuse to not be charmed. I want my life to be composed of beauty, love, and poetry, and I must live it here, unless I find a job somewhere. Not likely. I'm resigned. Added Wednesday, 21st of September. I'm learning Latin, mostly in the bath. I think the present suffers from a dearth of certain qualities like clarity or sense of humor, which in high degree are present in, I don't know, let's say in Horace. Though the modern public may not know it, this is what they ought to read, I think. Can I provide them what they need? Why not? I'm keen to learn, although I do have problems with deponent verbs, it's true. And yesterday I dropped my textbook, splat, right in the water. Useless, clumsy twat. Added 6th of October. I'm not just useless, though. I have a few abilities, like cooking, crab stick. You should taste my unctuous roasted onions filled with mascarpone. I am highly skilled at stuffing. And you'll laugh, but I've agreed to help this dyke I met who has to feed the crowd who come each month to this event she started running, which she claims is meant as an alternative to mainstream gay commercial culture, called the Queer Cafe. The food must all be vegan and soy-free. This dyke is German, stands like 8'3" in knee-high stripy stockings, which she wears with shorts and vests, which she pairs with shorts and vests. That's all she ever wears. She's like a priest. She's caring, hopeful, grave, and has this faith in something that will save us all. In her case, solidarity and knowledge of our hidden history. She tells me stories from the archives, where the Mollies cruised or Saphists met to share a drink, though not of alcohol, but tea. I guess she represents this pedigree herself of thoughtful, temperate, polite inversion, drawing to her monthly night a little flock of awkward kids that are too meek to brave the crowds down at the bar. Those twinks with frosted tips and bottle tans, and dykes with Calvin boxer shorts and Vans as if it's 1998. I swear, they shouldn't be so scary when they wear such dated clothes. And older ladies who have just transitioned age like 52 and wish that they could be in church instead. Nobody's ever drunk or off their head. Nobody talks. The German lady tries, but every topic she brings up just dies, and we go back to staring at the floor. And then next month, we all come back for more. Added 30th of October. My girlfriend thinks I'm frittering my time away on Latin, cookery, and rhyme. I need to leave our pokey flat, she says, and find some work that actually pays, perhaps at Asda? But I'm in a bind. I'm overqualified for any kind of job that I could plausibly secure, but can't get ones my actual training's for. I fucked myself. I got a PhD. I'm pretty sure the only hope for me to get out from this trap is if I write a book that's clearly total dynamite, transsexual poet's sudden breakthrough hit, and Carsonet or Faber publish it. Added January 2013, Bartlow, Cambridgeshire. Change of scene. Well, crabstick, something happened. Can you guess? My girlfriend got a job in the US. We're moving. Well, she's moved, but I will too for certain once I get my visa through. For now, I'm writing from my mother's place. I'm an embarrassment and a disgrace. An adult, deadbeat, tranny poet kid with weird opinions, so she keeps me hid up in the attic like this was Jane Eyre. It's fine, whatever. It's not like I care. I'm going to skip a bit about stealing her gin. Added February 2013. My brother left behind his PS3 when he went off to university, and I've become addicted to this game called Skyrim. It's an RPG. The name you get by default for your character when you begin the game is Prisoner, and I can't seem to change this. When I meet a person in the game, they always greet me by this title. Salutations, ho, well met, sir, prisoner. It's apropos. But here I am escaping. I'm a sort of highly muscled biped cat. I've fought a war and slain a dragon, and I've done all kinds of quests. I talk to everyone. My actions matter here. I get results. I bought a house. It has one of those cults of demon worshippers behind a trick partition wall, and so I had to kick them out. They left some bloodstains, but it's fine. I'm hoping to retire there. That line about the perfect joy of being well deceived keeps ringing like a distant bell inside my mind all night. I sit and play this game till dawn, and then I nap all day. Added 21st February. I need to run to get some exercise. I know you run a lot. I'd recognize from miles off your gawky, steadfast stride. You are a camel of a thing. You hide these huge reserves of energy, although without a hump that I can see. You go all day without a meal, through to 9 or 10 at night, but when you eat, you dine. We made one drunken night, do you recall? Potato mountain pie, and ate it all, a foot in height, another 2 around. We had it with a good red wine I found for half what it was worth, mislabeled in a spar in Sheffield, a Penfolds bin. Which bin was it? I can't remember now. And you said, other people don't know how to live. That wine, in fairness, was a coup. And now I'm standing with a running shoe in either hand, attempting to exhort myself to go outside and do some sport, to run around until my face is red, until I'm sick, until I wish that I was dead. Added 1:45 a.m. Remember when we lived together, Ben? Haha, I guess we won't do that again. Remember when you left? I felt so spurned. You went back north, I stayed behind and turned your room into an office, which I took to mean a place to fail to write a book and watch cartoons on DVD and drink. I did my best to fight a tendency to think obsessively about that awful night when we went out to Bow and had a fight because I accidentally left your flash new scarf behind inside the hipster bash we'd crashed. You were so drunkenly bereft, but we had no idea which flat we'd left, and I was desperate, so I pressed like half the buzzers, shouting, "We just want his scarf!" And then that semi-famous artist guy, a total prick, and also clearly high on coke, came down and started to berate us. Finally, he slammed the steel plate apartment building door right on your schnoz. We had to catch a night bus home. It was becoming light. Your nose was bruised. It bled profusely. Even though I cried and pled for like 2 hours straight, you wouldn't say a word to me the whole entire way. I bought you a replacement in the end. We loved each other. It was love, a friend for friend, which is no lesser thing. What is involved in growing up? Such sadnesses. What was it that I hoped that you would do? I still don't know. I simply wanted you. Added September 2013, last section. Well, Crabstick, I'm supposed to leave tonight. I'm packed. I have the visa and the flight. I don't expect you'll come to visit me. If it was Canada, you might. I'll see you sometime, who knows when. I don't suppose I'll post this letter. It's not one of those you read. It's more a letter that you write. Although I think of you most days, despite myself. of our vainglory in our youth, our self-conviction that we knew the truth, which was hilarious, and our disdain for any prize that we might hope to gain. The things we wouldn't lift our arms to take. We were such stupid kids. But we weren't fake. We danced and drunk a lot. You could do worse with youth. Perhaps this move will break the curse. Perhaps I'll get my joie de vivre back, and then I'll write and send to you a stack of letters full of gossip, insight, wit. Although I'm tired now, I must commit to finding such a life. I'm certain that is out there somewhere. Yours sincerely, Cat. Thank you for laughing at my jokes. Yes, we're staying. I'm moving over.
Yeah.
Oh, do we stay on the stools?
Sure, yeah.
Oh, do we sit on the ones at the back? How do we do this? Or you guys get to stand and
Just
interrogate
over, I
us?
guess,
This
yeah.
seems wrong. This
We'll
seems
go
wrong.
one at a time and then.
Yeah. Well,
You'll ask your cat question.
Wait, okay, sure.
Listen, you should have a seat.
Actually,
Take a seat.
oh, okay.
Come on. We need to...
Well, so part of how this event
You're
was
not
born
sitting.
is that. But part of the kind of
You can sit on the small one.
yeah, you're so right.
I think the way we all sit on small ones, we're on the same level. And then the people in the back can't see us either.
Amazing.
Cool.
Okay.
Cool. And Aurora will be back presently in it. Okay. Yes.
Okay.
Right. Questions?
Is that Sandra sort of discovered, I think, in maybe the introduction or
No,
note,
it's in.
or one of your poems?
It's in the call out. I'll pull up the page.
We're
Oh
doing
no, it's a
citations.
detailed reading.
Oh,
Fuck,
yes,
I'm
of
screwed.
course.
Can I remember anything I've written in the past? Almost certainly not.
It's the narrator in the call out has a line where she says, "I wish." You know about
Oh yeah.
Kate says, "You're such a teacher," and she says, "I wish I got my PhD in early modern poetry."
And this made us suspect that perhaps
Yeah.
you had gotten or almost gotten a PhD in early modern poetry. So I wondered if you wanted to say anything about kind of like your backstory with the early modernity and kind of maybe
Yeah.
what you liked about it or why it called to you, and maybe also why you ended up not going that
So
direction.
like Ben Krapsik basically screwed me on this one. Fuck you, Krapsik. I was like totally had in my mind I would do a PhD on Andrew Marvell, and then Ben got in the year for a PhD on Andrew Marvell, and I was like, fuck. I ended up doing like 20th century American for like other reasons, which I now think is a terrible mistake. The early modern period is much better. But I was kind of trying to distinguish myself from Benjamin Krapsik at that point. I was like, Benjamin Krapsik, I'm different to you. I'm going to do the 20th century. I'm not stuck in the past like you. So I think I was kind of sort of that was something I did because of my relationship with the boy. A mistake. But yeah, I mean, I just like the first thing I ever. I just really like the past, isn't it? Like, you know, I'm just like, this is part of what makes poetry so good. What makes literature so good is that you read these things and you find yourself in this like intense kind of deep relationship with people from totally different times and places. Or you think obviously they're dead, but you think you're in a relationship with them in this way. Like I remember when I was like 12 or 13 and read Jared Manley Hopkins for the first time. And I fell in love. I was like, oh my God, Jared Manley Hopkins. And I think it is definitely true to say that this has happened to me more often with people from before about 1749. My current working theory is that it is all Thomas Gray's fault. Everything goes downhill after 1749, and it's because of Thomas Gray. Yeah, so I ended up not doing a PhD in early modern stuff. I regret it. I think about these things all the time and read them and reread them. My best friend did get a PhD in it, so I did a lot of like reading all of his reading as well. So I also know probably more than I should about booksellers in 17th century London. Is that a functional answer?
Absolutely, yeah. And I'm curious if, like, for you, it feels like there's a particular kind of like trans possibility in early modern verse, or if it's sort of like you as a trans person just happen to like it. But yeah.
I think for me, this is probably, it's probably the other way around. It's probably that I feel like deep love for these kind of stylistic traditions, particularly.
Mm-hmm.
That what I really love is metrical verse. And one of the weirdest things about our contemporary literary moment is that we don't have a substantial metrical verse tradition happening. That people are, especially like long form stuff, like very few people are writing, even when people are writing like what they call verse narratives, you read them, you're like, this is not verse, it might be poetry. It is pretty rare that you get things. I'm not going to name names or be mean to anybody, but like there are plenty of things I've seen even marketed as like being in blank verse, and you read them and you're like, this is not in blank verse. Sorry, that was a very witchy thing. I actually started a Discord server called like Verse Complaint Service, where we bitch about things that claim to be in verse but aren't. And so for me, it feels really important that this is the stuff that I love, and I want this kind of thing to exist in the world, and I want us to be represented in those forms. I want there to be, well, I am currently writing a blank verse epic poem about transsexuals in 1999, because I feel like there should be a blank verse epic poem about transsexuals in 1999. So for me, it's much more about like, I love this tradition and I wish to place us in it, rather than that I feel the tradition already has us in it, because I think, for the most part, and with certain exceptions, I mean, all three of the people I was mentioning are definitely gays of some sort. Rochester's pretty bisexual. Barnfield obviously is the giant homo. And as for Andrew Marvel, what was his deal? Anybody got any clues? What's it? Eucortius Briars nail me through, right? Is Andrew Marvel's sexuality. He's like, please, I want to be tortured by plants.
So he was definitely into plants. Whenever he was
into plants and king, and yeah, who knows, man.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm curious, like, so in addition to your own writing, you're one of the editors of Little Puss Press, and like in your kind of role as one of the sort of stewards of trans literature, are there other ways that you see sort of like the past being brought into our present in these sort of creative media? Like what forms of what trans past seem to be like of interest to people, and is in what ways is sort of literary history a part of that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I am just publishing a book called Plastic Prison Void by a lady called Violet Allen, who has a training as a classicist. But it's a romantasy, and it's also about like Sailor Moon. But as well as being about Sailor Moon, it has like lots of things like footnotes about like translations of the Odyssey, stuff like that. She makes a very good Polytropos joke. She mistranslated as Polytropos. For those people who are going to get that joke, it's a great joke. So there's definitely like, there are people who are like thinking about these things, and certainly if those people have got books, I want to publish them. I think I would say that is there. I'm very like there for it. Do I see a lot of it? There are specific areas where, like, I feel like a lot of the kind of Christian trans people are maybe thinking pretty hard. There's like a lot of, I have a call, I say, we don't accept poetry, but we do accept narrative verse. And everything I get is all Christian. I get like a lot of submissions of like narrative verse about Jesus. Trans Jesus. Yeah, I've had like 3 separate trans Jesus narrative verse submissions. And I haven't in the end like done any of them, but I mean, I wasn't not tempted. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, so those seem to be people who are like thinking about like that kind of stuff. I mean, there's like Juno Dawson's novels, right? Mm-hmm. Those are cool. Those are thinking about the past in interesting ways. Harry Josephine Giles, she's thinking about the past in interesting ways. She's thinking about like the Neolithic past. That's cool. Great. She's writing like a long poem about somebody surviving a trans woman surviving a Neolithic flood. I'm very excited for it. So there's stuff out there for sure, and I would like to encourage there to be more of it. If any of you early modernists are writing things, send them to me.
Thank you so much. So also just some context for the non-early modernists in the room is that one of the reasons early modern trans studies became this sort of field was as a corrective to the history of early modern gender and sexuality studies, or Renaissance is another word we could use, gender and sexuality studies, which really formed and began to be theorized in the 20th century. The big critique of that early modern trans studies makes is that it really is theorized alongside an uncritical use of the models of the clinic and of sexology. Uh-huh. So if you read the like scholarship, not all of it, but a lot of it, from the beginning of looking at gender and sexuality in the Renaissance in like the 70s, 80s, 90s, even 2000s and 2010s, a lot of it is about transvestism and cross-dressing. A lot of it is looking to diagnose or decide if a character is really transgender or transsexual, or, what it means for a boy actor to, have a boy's body but play a woman on the Shakespearean stage. And there's all this, honestly,
the debates about I trow you were a gelding or a mare. You're like, what the fuck, dude? Get a grip.
Right, exactly.
He's not a guy.
Exactly, right. And about characters, but in this way that seems to participate in this glee at really undressing the trans body, and also not acknowledging at all that trans people are living people that live now and have also lived in the past. So that is the context of why 2019 is actually the year. It's not that long ago that this academic field kind of formed, even though, as you can see from these readings, that there are many, many ways to think about the past outside of sort of cis regimes, right? And that trans people have been thinking about that for a long time, and have been writing about it for a long time, actually, outside of academia, where trans people are generally underrepresented. So I did want to also ask a question specifically for Aurora, which is just, you have these three, in the section you read, which is so beautiful, these three pre-modern, let's say objects or historical archival moments. One is the story of Eleanor Reichner. One is Catherine of Siena and the sort of passion narrative of this saint. And one is the Bond Book of Hours. And so I'm just curious, for any or all of these, what drew you to them, what you found interesting about them, and how you ended up integrating them into your book.
Thanks, that's a really nice question. I guess starting with Eleanor Reichner, because it follows from what you were just talking about. I just like anyone, I wake up at 4 a.m. and I read about things. Most recently, the extinction of the Yangtze River dolphin in 2002, but first mammal extinct by human means. So anyway, just pour one out for her. But at this time, so I was writing this book, the end of 2019, the spring of 2020, the summer of 2020. And I had a lot of time inside, a lot of time outside too, but a lot of time inside. And I'd always been obsessed with wounds. I had self-harmed a lot. I'd been put in the psych ward multiple times for it. And one of the funniest things to me that happened the first time I was put in a psych ward, I was 21, I think. One of the techs who worked there, or some guy who worked there, was asking, they're like, why do you do this? And I was like, it brings me closer to God. I want to touch death lightly, etc., etc. Those kinds of answers that were, I guess, more fun than the usual answers. And then he was like, oh my God, you have to look up these Mayan priests, da 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 da. And I was like, that's such a crazy thing to say to me. That's really funny though. And then the heads of one of my college came and visited me in the psych ward, weirdly. And she was like, you are a shaman. I was like, what is wrong with all of you? I'm just wearing glitter eyeliner. But anyway, so I was always very interested in wounds. And to get to the point. And I was raised in the early 2000s, which I've talked about before, is an interesting time for surveillance and Christianity and the way those things were being used together. And I was living in Texas at the time. So I've always been really obsessed with Christianity. I read this introduction to a book by Donald Barthelme, 40 Stories, at one point, and when I was 17. And the guy who wrote the introduction was like Beckett, arthome is God-haunted but unbelieving, as in like Christianity's essential concern of both of their work. And I wouldn't necessarily call myself like unbelieving per se, but I like to participate in my own way, in my own like in a way that feels fun for me, so like a reparative way, fun and like compelling, I guess you could say, like has some emotional element to it too. So I read about the five wounds of Christ. I don't know why. I think like Benedetta came out around that time. And I don't know what else at that time would have. I saw Vanilla Sky, but that doesn't feel related. I was playing Skyrim. I got a house.
Yeah, don't need to say that.
And then I was bored of the game. I got a house, a horse, and a wife, and I was like, okay, I'm bored now. I won.
The dragon was not fun.
Yeah. I was like, all I want to do is like play Sims, but in this world. And then I was really mad that you didn't get more design options for the house. But so I read about the five wounds of Christ. I was reading about saints. I was really interested in Catherine of Siena. That's how I first got to it. I have always been interested in body fluids and divinity. That's kind of like the central concern of my work. Starting with self-harm, like blood and God, but also like being gay, common God, all fluids really. Love all fluids equally. And I happen to get interested in pus, not for myself, but because of Catherine of Siena.
For those who don't know, as part of Catherine of Siena's, I guess, passion, she not only starved herself, that was like not enough. She started like drinking pus out of wounds. That's like the narrative of how it goes, but there's pus everywhere, kind of in Catherine of Siena's whole diet. Well,
it started specifically, there was an older nun. She went to visit her. The older nun had a wound in her breast, and Catherine of Siena was like, "That's fucking nasty," and then felt really guilty because she was like, "I should be loving this other nun. Like, we're besties in Christ, and like, it's wrong of me to be grossed out by something like pus. Why would I be that kind of like spiritually weak?" So then she's like, "I'm actually going to devote the rest of my life to drinking pus because I am like so this is like the crisis of my faith." And in her biography, which was written by a monk, she says, "I shall consume what fills me with such horror," which felt like an amazing metaphor for being gay. And like sucking dick and stuff as a kid or whatever you do. And then the wound stuff, I read about the five wounds of Christ. She drank from the side wound, Christ. So she has a mystical marriage to Christ. On the one hand, her wedding ring is his foreskin, hers, foreskin. But also Jesus is like, okay, like drink from my wound and, it will like sustain you or whatever. And I was like, it's just like eating pussy. So
it has lips.
Yeah,
the side wound has lips.
Yeah. And so then, and he says like from like the lip, like he's like says lips and shit. So, so it's pretty like nasty in a like nice way. And so that got me to this book, this Psalter, which was recently on display at the Cloisters. I saw it for the first time, but there were representations of this wound in a lot of medieval art, and especially in nun psalters. And I read that nuns would stroke the image of the fifth wound while they prayed. And so all of this really was just like, there are more complicated ways I could describe it, but the simplest way is to say like, oh, like sex and God, and like fucked up bodily transformation sex and God have always been like joined as like very much, it's like a central concern of sort of the undercurrent of Christianity. Outside of maybe the like master narrative that's riding on top of Christianity. And so I was like, oh, like, I mean, you'd think that I would have made the fifth wound like bottom surgery, but but no, honey, I made it when I got knifed in the face, because that to me was an example of a very like that kind of experience where the opposite of what you would expect to happen emotionally happened, where I ended up feeling like, wow, no one else has ever like knifed me before, and like, because I had no idea who the person was. They never said anything to me. They just did it and ran away. And so they were this like mystery figure, almost like a divine visitation type thing. And that's why I ended up doing this, because I was like, I know nothing about this person, and never will. And like, there's something sexy about that. And especially because of my own past relationship to self-harm, I was like, oh, this person understands something about me. And this like, this is the way I was like dealing with it at the time, was like trying to repair that experience in a way that was like pretty deranged, but like at the time seemed reasonable. And now with some distance seems understandable, I would say, rather than reasonable.
Total sidebar, but do you know and like Nina Arsenault's work?
Never read.
Okay, it's performance, but I will talk about it after. So I will put you
Okay.
The Silicon Diaries and 40 Days and 40 Nights. You would be interested, I think.
Thank you. Okay. That's my answer, by the way. Sorry for going on so long.
No, it's so wonderful, and we'll open to general questions in 1 minute. But I did just want
more.
to,
Yes.
to the audience. I did want to say something I'm hearing in both of your comments that is really important to the work that we want. We want this sort of opening of history to thinking alongside trans things to be is on Sawyer, who is in the room now, our beloved. Something that they say is that, history is something that we can get to have, actually, right? Like that is part of this idea. And I heard you talking about this, Kat, of like feeling like maybe this, both in like not doing your PhD in this, but then also in the sense of like this feels like it's far away, but actually as a trans writer, you can claim it, right? And something that work important in early modern trans studies talks about is actually religion as well as part of that, and theology, especially in the context of the failure of secularism to protect trans people, right? To provide any model of livable lives. And so where else can we look, and where can we look at sort of like genealogies that maybe the present hasn't followed, or that we don't think of as directly alongside trans experience, and part of that goes to going to the defamiliarized past. And so I see that connection. The question I want to sort of ask, the last one from us, although we have a million other things we could ask you about.
There's the bar afterwards.
Yes, that is true.
About these things at length.
It's, we like to write about history, but at least me, I'll speak for myself, I'm not a creative person and don't write literature. I like to read it and I like to think about it. But you're both writers. And so from, I guess, us to you, we're interested in like, what does literature as a space do to think about a trans past? That history alone, just a Wikipedia article, or I'm sure you did a lot more digging than Wikipedia, but that the history of like a figure like Catherine of Siena or Eleanor Regner, or just the historian writing about Marvellian verse, like what does the literature add, or being a literary creator add?
Oh my God, okay, I have many answers, but do you want to go first?
Okay, because I forgot to talk. Yeah, I never answered the Eleanor Regner part. I was reading articles about her. Most of them were like, this male transvestite, da 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 da. And then there are also people saying like, this is the only recorded question mark in Western European like medieval history. And I was like, I kind of doubt that, as your whole field makes evident. But I was like, I can tell there's an account that she had to give John Fresh. So what I wrote in my book is a retelling in her voice that I imagined, and I did a bunch of research on Middle English to write it, and it took forever. And everyone was like, "Oh, I thought you were writing your whole book in Middle English. This is like 3 pages." And I was like, "It's hard," but like her testimony was rewritten by John Fresh in Latin.
Yes.
And so it was taken from her, reframed, put in a different language, And but even in that, I could hear a kind of like elements of a personality in her account, because she was like, yeah, I like fucked a lot of nuns for money. I fucked a lot of priests for money.
Priests give you more money.
Yeah, yeah.
Priests are better. They pay more.
Yeah, exactly.
And you're like, yes.
And she's like, and I had this like girlfriend Anna who like taught me how to like be a woman basically, and like sell my wares. And there's just so much personality even in this anesthetized account. And I was like, I have to find like open a space for this in fiction.
Get in bed together.
Yeah, exactly. Get in bed with her, among other like mythical figures in the book. I guess I do that a few times.
All this stuff that survives in these legal records is so banal.
Yes, yeah, and so it was like I didn't want to do a police report about getting knifed in the face. I didn't want her only record to be essentially a police report by a judge, and so like I felt a kinship with her in that way. And I spent a lot of time talking about in that book and other times like the ancient future.
Yeah.
I also put this on my Instagram for the ancient future, the distant present, and the past that is yet to come. Like all of those are things that make me feel like life is possible, because when I see things moving in a straight line and minimizing and specimenizing and taxonomizing like linear time, it delimits like the possibilities of life. So I'm like, okay, well, if I can't move forwards, if things in my immediate forwards are looking like not great, what other directions can I move in? And fiction allows me a space to move in time and make a collage of different possibilities in different parts of time that make my life livable and add pockets of space to a present that can feel really constricted.
Yeah, okay, this is a great question. The first thing, I have three things I want to say. First one is I want to say, I think there's just less of a divide actually than you might think, that like, I think scholarly work and creative work, there's all writing. We are all of us giving depictions of ourselves, engaging with whatever we're engaging with, in many cases, the past, right? And so I actually think there's less difference there than you might think. I am maybe just allowing myself to have really large amounts of fun. That feels mainly the difference between this and when I wrote more academic work. I'm just like, yeah, okay, what if I really let myself enjoy myself doing this? Not to say that some people don't really enjoy writing scholarship. Good luck to you. The second thing I realized I didn't talk about before when you were asking this question, but I can mention it in this context. The other thing I think about all the time in this context is Shola von Reinhold's Load. You guys have read Load, maybe? Yeah. That fucking book is so good. And like the stuff in that about like kind of necrophilia and about like trans fictions, but also about like kind of how we should be allowed to glut ourselves on these things. I read that and I was like, yes, that's what I'm saying. And like I think about that book all the time in terms of thinking like, what does art let you do in relation to this past, to these things? And I think the answer is, it relates to what I said about how much fun I'm having, that it's like glutting. That you get to really like, you get to be transfixed by these things, you get to like feast on them. Mm-hmm. And I think the kind of sense of joy that Shola puts in that book is really, and then maybe the third thing, so I have an idea for a book, and I'm never going to write this book, but I'm going to tell you about it instead of writing it maybe, and this will be like the only since it has. Emily Jo says I'm not allowed to write it. She's like, Kat, you can't write that book, it'll be bad. But I think it's a good idea, which is, I imagine it as kind of sort of a chamber musical, but in like poetry. So there would be kind of all these characters, and each character would speak in like a historically appropriate kind of metrical format. And it would be called, I think I'm going to call it Philosophize is to Learn How to Die, but it's kind of basically a twist on I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream, which is that like some like trans girls have programmed an AI, which is within itself is like reincarnating historical people they've decided are trans and trying to force them to like transition. So like all of these like historical figures that we like investigate are stuck inside this AI, and it opens on like Caliminus Ben Caliminus, who is like a lady now. I'm very happy about it, but also totally lonely, like walking around in like heaven. And then like a biblically accurate angel appears and says, Caliminus, we need you to go down and like help all these other people who are unable to like come out of purgatory. So she descends into purgatory and finds like people like having a name like Cutpurse, Mel Cutpurse, who very strongly is like, I am not trans, not like that fucking disgusting aniseed water Robin. I just like to dress as a man and do man stuff and fuck ladies and steal things, but I'm definitely not like that. It's gross. Or like whatever, like also like, you know, Kurt Cobain or like whoever, like all these people.
We'll show you the aniseed water Robin music that was written about them later.
All these people who want to kind of, and there's like whatever, like the Princess Seraphina. I fucking love the Princess Seraphina.
Yes.
What a great character. Do you guys know the Princess Seraphina? Who turns up in like an 18th century court document? Well, actually, she doesn't so much turn up in it. The person who really turns up is this old lady who's the shopkeeper in her neighborhood who's like, the Princess Seraphina is a very fine lady and you shouldn't mistreat her. Like this kind of old cis woman really going to bat for this like trans lady in a polyamorous relationship in her neighborhood. You know, she's very fine. She goes to all of the balls. I never heard she had any name but the Princess Seraphina. It's great. Anyway, and I was like, what if all these characters are stuck in this kind of mechanical purgatory, but also the thing about them is they actually don't also fit into these categorizations,
Yes,
right?
that's right.
And that's part of what's interesting about them, actually, is that they don't. That when people want to kind of make this kind of straightforward claim, like, this is our history and there was always been transness, it's just the same. What it does is it kind of essentializes the transness that we have as somehow like the essential form of this, that we have finally achieved. It's very fucking teleological. And actually the thing that's interesting is maybe more, like you say, this kind of moment of being like, I fucking love you. You're so weird. Those are my three answers.
So I have two other short things to say. One is that when I was doing research on the Galai, which everyone obviously knows about, but like I think there's like a problem with like a lot of like white European trans girls over-identifying with them when they were actually an Anatolian cult that was like stolen by the Roman Empire, and that's why there's like a third gender historically in Italy anyway. Like the only like historical third gender in the West is because it was like stolen. So anyway, I was writing an essay about that, but then I'm like, I'm not an academic, and so I gave up. But in my research, I was reading, there's so much writing on quote unquote trans woman-esque figures in the ancient Mediterranean by dozens and dozens of writers. And I think it was Augustine who, one time I was on a plane with a bunch of nuns when I was like an evangelical Christian when I was 17, and I was like, oh, I like St. Augustine. And this nun was like, it's Augustine. And I was like, what are you gonna get another like 15-year-old like closeted tranny telling you? Anyway. But
also, that's not how they say it in the town in Florida.
Good. But I believe it was him who wrote about like these trans woman-esque figures binding their foreheads in the early modern period to flatten their brow bones. And I'm like, we've always been so inventive. Like, that's so cool. So that's one thing. And like different ways of doing gender and desire and all kinds of stuff is another, that's a really good point about the past. And it also just reminded me of the strangest interaction I had a couple of years ago in a bar when this is like Chaser like 3.0 level stuff. This guy comes up to me and he's like, the cis guy, and he's like, have you heard of the public universal friend? And I had narrowed my eyes and I was like, duh. And then he like gave me ecstasy, and that was that.
That's a perfect interaction.
Anyway, moving on.
Just two tiny notes about that. There's a little section at the beginning of one of Paul Preciado's books where he says he was writing a dissertation about St. Augustine being a transsexual, and I've been trying to find it. So if anyone here has a Preciado Connect, I would love that dissertation. And the thing you said about techniques as well, I would like to add in, right? The question of identification is really important to do this historical sort of distance from, but we can also look to the past for technique of transition. I think that what you mentioned about the brow bone is part of that.
Amazing. Yeah, and we'll kind of move towards wrapping up soonish, but I wanted to leave space if folks in the audience have questions for our wonderful authors. If you're near the front, you can come up and say it into the mic, or I'll repeat it so that everyone can hear.
Oh my God, it's so nice that all these people, everyone's a little bit hot. It's very hot in here.
Yeah.
Fan yourselves, darling.
We have more questions if not, so no pressure. But
I'm standing up too.
Please.
Okay, this is almost thought through enough, so hopefully it all makes sense. This is a thought I had when you were talking about bodily fluids and stuff, and it's relevant for anybody to answer. But I don't know, something that I've thought about, I'm not a historian or anything, but I've taken classes, and it's interesting to read a lot of like medieval, early modern stuff, because there will be like totally different sets of what people refer to. So the thing in my brain is like reading a bunch of Reformation literature, like very quickly they'll be saying whatever theological point the professor wants you to make, and they'll make like 8th grade level poop jokes at each other, and there's like a lot of scatology and stuff, which anyway is interesting. And part of my thought on that is it indicates at least there's a different set of codes about what you can say when it comes to fluids and stuff in that time, but probably indicates a very different actual lifestyle relationship with all of these sorts of fluids. So the question I had was like, is this an interesting space to go into, to like go back? I don't know if you guys are thinking about that when you write stuff, but like I guess
What did water
sorts
sports
of
look
things,
like in the early modern period?
potentially, but like what sort of
Yeah.
things when it comes to like totally different living, which is also, you know, a constant question for queer people in a very different way. But like what sorts of places do you go in the past when working with all of these sorts of texts, especially in like a creative way? So I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you.
I don't know a lot about bodily fluids in the past. Do you? You? Well, you probably want more than me.
So what jumps to mind is just like my second book. There's a novella in it called Celebrity Skin, named after the whole song. And it's about, so there's all this writing on the Galli, but there's also a cult devoted to this figure, Aphroditos, who was, some writers said that it was like a different aspect of Aphrodite. Some writers said it was like Aphrodite's shadow self or sibling or whatever. And obviously all said he. It was Aphrodite with a dick. And depictions of her or whatever. That was very boomery of me. whatever the fuck was going on there. She has her skirt lifted up and like her dick
the skirt lift.
is like bing, yeah, like pointing the way to the future. But and it was used to ward off evil, and that's where a line in Fifth Wound comes from. Girl dick is a good omen. Which I just thought was funny. So there was like almost no writing about this cult that was also devoted to Aphroditus. There's all this writing about the Galli because they were like absorbed into the Roman pantheon. Their goddess was, but almost no writing. The writing that exists, like there are writers who reference other writing that has been lost. And so I was like, let me imagine that. And like what it would be like to, like what forms of like transition or like doing gender or like hanging out as girls and like being catty with each other and fucking like would be possible in a space like a cult to a like goddess with huge tits and a dick. What's going on there? And in my story, they all live in caves behind a waterfall, and they have like an estrogen ritual. Because at the time, I also I was doing research on DIY estrogen stuff, and so I was like, oh, like you don't need necessarily like advanced science to synthesize estrogen. And I was like, I bet people figured out ways to like
drink horse piss.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah. So there's and
Self-castrated.
thank you. Yeah, and exactly. So all these things.
Yeah, a lot of people, but yeah, that's the common one.
And so I liked to imagine that. Now I'm imagining how you'd get by like being stealth in the 70s in Austin, because like I'm from Texas and I was doing a lot of like when I was deep in my addiction, I was doing a lot of like stealth fucking strangers in Austin. I was like, I wonder how that would be in the 70s. And I also had this feeling like I'm obsessed with Townes Van Zandt, have been since I was a kid. If I wanted to be a country singer and didn't want to out myself, how would I be able to perform songs? Oh, I would create a secret identity as a man and like perform as a man and like bind my breasts and do that kind of thing. That's going away from fluids. But anyway, just like imagining spaces, constantly imagining what within a certain set of limitations would be possible in a certain historical space is like the fixation of all my work. And reminds me of like you saying that fiction and like academic work are not that far apart. Reminds me of that Cydia Hartman essay about like imaginative.
Critical fabulation.
Yes,
Yeah.
critical fabulation, which I read as I was writing The Fifth Wound in 2020, and I was like, whoa! And so that's that was partially what inspired a lot of the spatial historical imagining that I was doing then. So.
Yeah. The only thing I'd add to this is I think bodily fluids is certainly one thing that we have a very different relationship to it, had a relationship in the past. Another one is like God, right? There's just like so much God in the past. I was just reading like The Body and Society, Peter Brown's The Body and Society, which is great. And like all of the like castration crazes that he describes in that. I'm like, yeah, they're all like, we're cutting our balls off for God. But you're like, yeah, that is a reason why you would do it, right? And I guess this is also what the Gandhi saying. They're like, we're cutting our balls off for the goddess. Like you find that you articulate these things through what's to hand. And one thing that was much more to hand there. Now we cut off our balls through science, which is kind of less good, honestly. I would much rather cut off my balls for God. Seems like a better reason.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
You can go.
I'm curious how both the writers and the scholars here, you mentioned the distinction sort of between like essentializing and projecting backward in time the transness that we understand now, and also like acknowledging and honoring the transness that did exist in the past in some form. I'm wondering, because this does seem like it is an area of perhaps friction, if not outright contradiction, and I'm wondering how in your practices and your like ways of thinking you sort of like look at this area.
Yeah, this is kind of a question for you guys.
I mean, I can say something.
In my fiction, I just don't call people trans. I just describe everything.
Yes, I feel like that's part of it, is like the kind of diagnostic label is not that important, but I what Kat was saying really made me think about like, I guess another principle that I found helpful in my work is to like not assume that we are more free as trans people now, or that we have like greater possibility to live authentic lives. It's possible that in many cases that is true, but I think it's kind of not helpful when we like turn to the past as if we know that already. And it's like, oh, you poor, sad trans people who lived before hormones, you know? Whereas I feel like, for me, I kind of feel like, okay, by living before the medicalization of transsexuality, these figures had space to imagine their bodies and genders and desires and souls in ways that I kind of can't conceive, and that in many ways might be more expansive and kind of offer me possibilities that I need, because as Kat was saying, to kind of transition in the hospital through science actually feels like a kind of impoverished model compared to like this kind of rich, vibrant, like iconographically and aesthetically really kind of complicated and enticing world of kind of gender in the past, especially, but not only in the realm of religion. Yeah, and so I feel like kind of taking an attitude of great, kind of historicizing our own form of transness and being kind of humble about it is sometimes helpful for me.
Yeah, and I would say the other angle, I'm going to quote Hanu, who's in the room, who gave a wonderful paper at the conference this week. It's also about doing a history of cisness and how we come to have the naturalized default idea of the cis, white, sexually reproductive, heterosexual body. And that is a history, as Jacob said, of race and of empire. And you know, I'm also personally interested in how in trans studies, which as an academic field tends to skew, when they say trans history in trans studies, we usually think 19th century or early 20th century forward with sexology, the advent of what we would think of as medical transition, and C. Riley Snorton's work, Black on Both Sides, is sort of really one of the most important books about that, about the racial history of that, and Jules Gill Peterson's work as well, is saying that, you know, science has a history earlier as well than the 19th century. So what are those discourses, especially in the early modern, which is the time of, you know, the expansion, institutionalization of colonialism, right? How do the ideas of binary sex and gender and the fixity of them come to be realized as so connected to whiteness? And, you know, when I was emailing Aurora about this event, I ended up emailing an example of like an early modern medical treatise that is sort of pre-thinking about what hormones are, right? And how there are like these glimpses of what becomes what we think of as the regime of the present in this early modern past. And I think part of that archival and tracing is part of the history of all of these systems as well. And thinking about how gender as a regime is related to all of those things, right? It's not just intersectionality, but it's actually seeing how these things are intertwined at their root.
Do either if you want to add.
That was really great. And I guess like this, I only mean this answer partially because to me it totally I think would be a cop out, but I think any like historical fiction is already like kind of violating the reality that happened then and like writing a new reality over it. And so there is a lot of like ethical and critical issues that arise in trying to imagine. There are issues that arise in writing autofiction, like and telling my version of a story that involves other real people, and how much information I'm allowed to share about those other real people. And my sort of answer has always been to say as little as possible, which I fear makes it look like I'm like not interested in other people, but I just like don't want to like tell their stories. And so when that comes to something like as far back as me imagining an Aphrodite cult, I'm like, okay, well, I'm already violating reality by imagining this anyway. I'm also having fun. So violating reality on like a level of transness doesn't feel functionally different from violating every other level of reality, from the like minute to the large. So I'm like, why not have a little fun while I'm here?
Very briefly, the answer I have is, so the epic poem I'm writing, the blank verse epic poem, 10,000 lines, kill me, is set in the year 1999 and is about an upper-class English trans lady who used to serve on the Queen's yacht Britannia, who finds herself dragged into investigating a murder mystery, and as a result of this realizes that she's wrong about everything. And my impulse there, you guys read Sylvia Townsend Warner?
Mm-hmm.
I like love Sylvia Townsend Warner. I mean, I love The Corner That Held Them, which is like such a great book, but I also love Somerville Show, which is clearly Sylvia Townsend Warner, who was like a communist lesbian, right, in kind of the sort of 1930s, trying to imagine this kind of like upper class English dyke of like the 1840s, I guess, right? And trying to imagine how she could be saved, how she could be brought outside of her context and made to see that the things that her life is structured around are wrong, and what if she could be freed from them. And the way she does that is she like finds an excuse to get her to Paris for the Paris Commune and has her meet this kind of Jewish radical who she then has sex with, and like whatever, then they get it, she gets involved in the barricade, and it's like in some ways it's like an implausible fantasy, right, that this woman would even get that far. But the far that she gets is a far that is there. It is something that like exists. So I was kind of trying to imagine this woman like meeting the kind of person who might have like read Gender Trash. You know what I'm saying? Like 1999, what if this woman had like, I'm actually literally in my mind, I was going like, what if she met Beth X? But that's another story. We'll talk about Beth X in the bar. And so I think like, if you're doing that kind of stuff, if you want to imagine a transformation or healing of history in some way, if you want to, you can't be doing it like, what if she knew what I do and agreed with me? It has to be more like, what if somebody that I would have been in that, if I was in that time, what if some whose limitations I can totally identify with was able to access other things in that time that seem less limiting to me, I guess.
Those are both such great answers. I think we'll end there.
Wait.
Do you want to say something? Yeah.
Yeah, I just remembered something.
Please.
There was this show that came out in like 2018. It was about like an aristocratic white woman in England. Who's
Gentleman Jack.
That's
Yeah,
an
I love
example.
that show. She's so hot. Oh my God.
I was going to say, to me, that's an example of like a fucked up.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, okay, she's a
Yeah,
landlord.
she's like evicting her tenants.
Yeah,
sleeping with her
and
hot
being like,
girlfriend.
like,
Very
it-
butch girl boss. Yeah.
Yeah, it was. I was like, oh,
Yeah.
when I was watching it, and so like there are these, because there's been so many like historical fiction lesbian things in the last like.
And the
10 years.
reality is much less like aspirational always,
Yeah,
right? The
yeah.
reality is always much more like, oh my god,
Yeah.
fuck, wow, you're fucking crazy.
Right, trans people can also be evil is also
Yeah.
an
Yes.
important
And also, like,
thing that we
Alice is
learned
definitely
from
a
trans history.
somewhat trans figure, right? Like, people say lesbian, but I'm like,
Yeah,
I don't know,
Gentleman
man.
Jack, trans. But it's like I was like, is the show aware that this person's evil, or is
the show is
or is the show kind of like being like, look at this like
Slay,
cool fucked
yeah.
up slay landlord?
the show is definitely like
So anyway,
I just want to say to end that if you are someone who is in this room and just heard a bunch of names, texts and people you've never heard of, there are many that I've never heard of in this conversation, and you feel like, oh, I'm not an academic, I don't do research, I don't know who that is, I don't know if I'm allowed to say things about trans history in this way. I think we would both agree that you can and you should, and we want you to think about it. So ask someone, who was Eleanor Reichner, right? Have these conversations, and they're just like, this is something that belongs to all of us. That's part of why we wanted to have this event, is to not just have these conversations in a stuffy, wonderful, but also a general stuffy world of academia, and say that like this historical work is being done by people in and outside the academy, and it is yours to have too, right?
Absolutely. So let's thank our wonderful readers.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you, Joel and Bella. You can buy Aurora and Kat's books in the back, as well as I believe other books from BGSQD that are around us.
We'll
We'll
sign
probably
them.
all get a drink afterwards, so please join us, come hang out. Thank you for being here.
that was so fun. That was so fun.
And you have to write that book.
And then he says I can't.
I feel like